Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have another special treat. I love inviting people that I already know and my friends onto the podcast because they're doing incredible things as well. And I think that it's worth sharing that incredible things with other people. So Danny Shelton, he actually has a more powerful counterpart who's not on here.
Sorry.
I'm just teasing. They're both incredible. So Danny and Darcy Shelton, they own D&D Fitness, which would make sense, right? Fitness and nutrition. And their story is really incredible. You got to go check them out on Instagram, Facebook, and see some of the transformations they've made. But Danny specifically, he's been prior military service, went through a rough patch, which I'm sure he'll share with you, and finally got kind of to the other side of that rough patch and decided he took care of his health a little bit better. He changed his life, and that's really what he did for himself. And now he's committed to helping other people change their lives as well. So on Facebook, they have a group. If you want just like constant inspiration to become a better human in all areas of your life and specifically fitness, then it's called Getting Stronger Together. And I don't even know what that group is up to now, but it's getting pretty big. And then IG, it's
100 people or something like that.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then on IG, it's D&D Fitness and Nutrition. And then same thing, their website is dndfitnessandnutrition.com. So go check them out because I know that you're going to get a lot of value, not just from this episode, but from following and engaging with them. They're super, super sweet humans. Sweet as in cool, and sweet as in the nicest people you're ever going to meet. So super grateful to have them on here. Danny, go ahead and share with us your story, how you ended up getting connected to Darcy. I know she's not here, but she deserves to be honored as well. And where are you guys at now? What are you guys building together?
Yeah, we have to talk about Darcy. She's by far the better looking half of this situation.
That's true. Yeah.
Well, Sam, so, my story, when I tell my story, I usually start in my teen years. I grew up and I have to precurse it every time I tell my story because I have such an awesome relationship with my family now. But as a teenager, as it is with a lot of teenagers, that just wasn't the case. I have a family that was very much into discipline. And, at that point in my life, I was not really into that whole concept. But I guess I really didn't know what I was about. The majority of my memories when I was at that age are memories of feeling very inadequate. I was a teenager that did not have very many friends. I did not connect well with people. And if I'm being honest, it hurt my feelings. It hurt my feelings a lot. And I tended to mask those feelings in a very unhealthy way. And I would mask those feelings with a massive surge of ego. And so I would walk around and let people know how awesome I thought I was and how cool I was and how I was smarter than them and better than them. And at that point in my life, that was really the only way that I knew how to feel okay with myself. But as you can imagine, when you're in a very restrictive household the way I was, I moved out as early as I could. It was on my 18th birthday. I was pretty fortunate to be able to graduate high school early. And yeah, I was out of there, man. I mean, as fast as I could. And from there, I went on to doing something that I felt like was somewhat meaningful, but also the military was offering $20,000 sign-on bonuses. And so I went and I did that. They paid me a big chunk of money, and I went and did some fun stuff. I got to jump out of airplanes. I got to travel a little bit. I got to go do some things. And then, there's a lot of other stuff that's kind of, I'm going to skip over because I don't want to take up the entire podcast on my story. That would take forever. But what ended up kind of happening with me in my military service is I ended up suffering from something that's called PTSD, which is something that has become more popular over the last 10, 20 years. Not popular, but like it's something that we know about a little bit more, right? For me, my PTSD took on the form of pretty heavy anxiety, had some nightmares, and overall just kind of struggled with day-to-day life a little bit. And I did what most people do, right? You go to the doctor and you try and figure out what's going on. And, my doctors were great. They did what they are trained to do. And they gave me meds. They gave me lorazepams and some mazepams and geodones for a minute there. They gave me Adderall. They gave me Xanax. Whatever I wanted. I mean, truthfully, like if I was struggling with sleep, they knocked me out. If I was struggling with depression, they lifted me up. If I was struggling with focusing on something, then they helped me focus. You know what I mean? But it got to the point where I just created this very unhealthy mentality with medication of like, hey, I don't feel good. I better just go get a script. And then, that lasted for in a somewhat normal way, I guess you could say, for about 6 months, meaning I was taking medications as prescribed and not doctor shopping, not looking for alternative methods of making myself feel better, right? But I decided after about 6 months that I had enough experience in the medical field now, and I was going to take control of that situation all on my own. And I did that by, at first it was doctor shopping. Which is pretty bad because I don't know if anybody knows this, but like military doctors will give you whatever you want. And so when you're doctor shopping other doctors, when you have these military doctors that already have you on like 5 or 6 different prescriptions, it's a lot of medication that's coming through. You know what I mean?
Define doctor shopping, because I've never heard this term before.
So doctor shopping means that I am working with my doctor and he's giving me prescriptions. And then I am going to another doctor and I am not telling him about my previous doctor and getting the same prescriptions. So I'm getting double dosage.
How does that, just out of curiosity, because I'm assuming you know this, maybe you don't, but how does that not get flagged somewhere in somebody's system, like because they have like general medical information bureau. So how does that get past all that?
It doesn't, but you can do it for a while.
Okay.
And so you can double down for sometimes up to about 3 to 5 months. And there's definitely a reason that I have been red flagged in numerous systems saying like, hey, by the way, he's doctor shopping. But yeah, there are definitely a lot of systems in place to prevent this from happening. They're not immediate systems, but the first people that are going to notice are usually your insurance company because they're just like, what is going on here? But yeah, it's definitely not something that you can get away with long term. And on top of that, to be honest with you, before the opioid epidemic or whatever we're calling that, back before coronavirus, we had other problems with the world. But we had the opioid problem. We used to be able to get away with a lot more. They are much stricter on drug regulation now than they were back in the day. But there was a time when your doctor would give you, an opioid prescription for a headache. And obviously that's not the case anymore, but back then I had 3 doctor prescriptions for 3 headaches. You know what I mean? And so anyways, yeah, that lasted for a very short amount of time. And then exactly what you're talking about, I get flagged in the system and all of a sudden all of these doctors shut down all of my prescriptions. Right. And at that point in time, trying to come off of benzos and trying to come off of opiates and trying to come off of everything, it's not as fun as you might think. It's physically pretty awful. And I definitely, in my mind, I was like, oh, that sucks. But then I vividly remember at the time I was working in North Dakota in the oil fields, and I vividly remember driving home And all of a sudden I feel like I'm getting sick. I'm having cold sweats, and just feel sick to my stomach, and I feel awful. And that was my first experience with understanding that I had a physical addiction to some of these drugs. And from there, that's definitely kind of the big negative pivot in my life, where I went from somebody who, was working and had a sustainable income, doing, paying my bills, and I had a home and I had a car and all these things. And then from that point on, that's when I transitioned into street drugs. And from there, everything kind of hit the fan. For me, there are a lot of people that can get away with doing drugs and kind of maintain a semblance of what life looks like. For me, as soon as I started doing harder drugs like heroin and meth, that was it. I'm going to say within about 2.5 weeks, I don't remember if I left or got kicked out, but I was not welcome in my home anymore. You know what I mean? And, everything just got really, really bad within months. I had completely run out of money. And, sometimes I was sleeping at what's called a trap house, which is basically just a house full of other people using drugs. Not really sure who pays the rent in those places. I mean, the 99% of the time, nothing's being paid and there's a foreclosure notice on the door, it's pretty bad. And, if I couldn't get to one of those, there were times when I just walked all night long with nowhere to go. And so it got really interesting, in a very negative, bleak way. So from there, we did that. I did that. I'm not a very good drug addict. I got to tell you, I was a drug addict who, from very early on in that heavy addiction phase, I started getting into trouble with the law. And so, I was sometimes out on the streets and other times I was in jail, on drug charges generally. And then going to treatment centers. I'm somebody that actually went through rehab like 14 different times, 9 different treatment centers. So there's a lot of stuff in there, right? Just a lot of chaos is really the best way to describe it. But a transition kind of happened. I'm going to say that it was 6 years ago now. It's been a while. And I was this is kind of one of the, towards the tail end of all this junk, right? And this jail stint ended up just being a little bit different. I ended up being in jail with a bunch of people that were doing burpees and push-ups. And that was the cool thing to do in that pod. Right. And, I had always been pretty physically active. I've had a NASM certification, which is, I would call that like an entry level personal training certification, right? It's like the bare basics of what you need to have to be a personal trainer somewhere like Vasa or something like that, right? And so I had this certification, and all of a sudden I spent about 4 months in jail exercising. And then I got out to treatment, and my last treatment center was the Haven, and just continued exercising. Now, I've spent a lot of time in AA meetings, and I've worked the 12 steps and things like that. And those things are so important. But the thing that really, really changed my life is I went to a place called Fit to Recover. And what that is a nonprofit organization of people that are exercising together. And the majority of those people are in recovery. And there are people there that are not in recovery that are just supportive human beings that are just trying to also be a part of other people's recovery stories, which is pretty cool. And that's really when the change happened for me, right? I went from this place of just very selfish and ego-filled personality to all of a sudden, I found something that I was so passionate about. I loved to exercise. I loved to help other people gain a better sense of themselves through exercise. I loved to help empower other people, not only in fitness, But all of a sudden, I started finding that when you can take control of your physical self, it just gives you that sense and that ability to really take on other things that are tormenting you in your life. And so for us drug addicts, it is so cool because all of a sudden we find this new passion and this new thing that we can direct all of that negative energy, and we can start doing something positive for ourselves and for others. And, for Darcy and I, so Darcy and I actually met probably about 7 years ago. She met me while I was still heavily using. And she was actually a caseworker at an outpatient treatment center that I was at for like a couple of weeks before I left. And so, it's funny because Darcy and I stayed in touch really the entire time that I was going through all that nonsense, right? And she always told me that if I could put a year sober together, that she would take me out or let me take her on a date. So I put a year sober together and asked her out. And 3 months later, she finally gets back to me and we go on a date. But after that, it was kind of, it's been awesome ever since. We've been inseparable since then. When we started dating, Darcy was the executive director at a women's treatment facility, the Renaissance Ranch House for Women. And so again, you have two people that are just very passionate about helping people. Darcy has a pretty long history with drug abuse and in a very severe eating disorder herself. And those are really, some of the people that we spend so much time helping. We work with a lot of women. Empowering women is definitely one of the big things that's very important to us. But especially women that feel misunderstood. Because there are so many women out there that have gone through this awful yo-yo of diet culture and this is what I'm supposed to look like and this is what I'm supposed to do to lose weight. And so many of these poor women are just starving themselves and running on the treadmill for 2 hours a day and then getting frustrated with their results, or even more frustrated that they can't keep the results off. And so we work with a lot of people that have just struggled. And our job is not necessarily to really give people the quote unquote perfect diet. It's more along the lines of what we really want to do is empower you and give you the tools that you need in order to let you do it all on your own and live a lifestyle that you can maintain forever.
Yeah, I think that is the key, because I know a lot of people, just as you said, the yo-yo dieting, man, that's the crime of the century. I don't know. It's a pretty big deal. It's
just, it's really what it looks like to take advantage of people. Because if you start doing the math on some of these crazy diets, like you're doing so much damage to your metabolism and doing so much damage to your psyche that it's causing more harm than doing any good. And unfortunately, most of these fad diets are programmed for you to go through them, 3, 4, 5, 6 times because you lose a bunch of weight, but you're doing something that's not maintainable. And so you put that weight back on, and then you do that same thing that works again because you did it, right? And then the next time you put a little more weight back on. And so I'm curious though, do you think the people who created those diets is that their intention for it to be the yo-yo dieting, or is it just people's lack of commitment to not just dropping the weight? Because I think that there's a level of where dropping the weight makes sense, but then transitioning from a drop weight perspective to a healthier lifestyle. I think in my experience of being around some of these fad diets, ketosis, or these different programs, Weight Watchers, whatever it is, right? Their goal is not necessarily to have you hooked on their product for forever. Although, they definitely encourage you continuing buying their product, because why wouldn't you? But right. In my experience of as far as the education and the intent behind it, they have their products as a stimulant to get people down to weight. And then they do give you resources, at least when my wife used one of these things to
lose weight. They did give you cookbooks and resources to have healthier meals and guidance and all that. But then the reality of human nature is that we don't stick to it. So I don't know how much of it is the diet's responsibility for screwing with people, and how much of it is just people's lack of consistency and commitment to themselves.
I'm going to talk about two different diets that I consider to be fad diets and things that are helpful in the short term, but not in the long term, because we kind of have two different perspectives. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
So the first one I want to talk about is Weight Watchers. Okay. Weight Watchers has been around forever. And the basic concept of Weight Watchers is pretty simple. They basically monetize your food into points, and they count calories for you. They give you a certain number of points. You hit the points however the heck you want. And if you hit your points, you lose weight, right? So not a bad system. All they're doing, just for anybody listening, like all they're doing is counting the calories for you and putting it into a point system. Like it's really not a difficult program. But Weight Watchers in general, they put you in a weight loss phase, and they actually, if you ask them to, they can bring you back up into a maintenance phase. It's called a reverse, right? But the issue is that Weight Watchers members are completely helpless as soon as they are not paying for that point system. And so as soon as you're not paying for the point, Weight Watchers has created a system where you are completely dependent on them. And the expectation is that you pay for Weight Watchers forever, because they don't take the time to teach you how to actually count a unit of energy in your food, which is a calorie, right? So in my opinion, is it wrong per se to help somebody lose weight? No. And I understand the idea, right, of creating a system that somebody's completely dependent on. But why should you have to pay for Weight Watchers for 30 years? So
I like playing devil's advocate, because that's a very cynical way of viewing it, which is fine. And I'm not saying it's a wrong way, but there's the other side of it, that there's some people who just want stuff done for them. They don't want to think about it. There is such a thing as decision fatigue, and to say there's not is scientifically inaccurate. So because decision fatigue is a thing, and if that's not something you're passionate about, you don't ever want to have to think about what to eat, when to eat, where to eat, all those things. Is it going to be good enough for me? Not good enough for me? Am I going to stay? Like sometimes it's just from an opportunity cost perspective, looking at all resources, not just finances or health. Sometimes it does make sense for the done for you person to be on Weight Watchers for the rest of their life. And that's not a bad strategy if that's why somebody's using it. The problem comes in when somebody's misusing something because they're not educated enough to know what it's to be used for and what it's not to be used for. So I don't think Weight Watchers is a problem. Again, maybe because they're not educating their client base and saying, this is who we're good for, and we're refusing everybody else. And that you could say potentially is on them.
Kind of.
I think accountability in life, the idea that somebody's a victim is really hard for me to stomach. Just like, I think that there's always a way for you to take accountability. So, but it is a good clarification that Weight Watchers is a good done for you. You never have to think about it system if that's what you're looking for.
No, and I agree. Here's my issue with it.
Sure.
And it's not a massive issue. It's one that I take personally because of the client base that I work with. I work with people that are struggling to maintain a lifestyle, right? And so here's my issue with that whole concept, okay? It's like 9 times out of 10, if you're doing Weight Watchers or any other fad diet, right? It's usually because you have reached some level of desperation and you don't have the money to pay, or you don't think that you have the money to actually invest into a health coach or a nutrition coach that can really teach you and give you quality education. So Weight Watchers is significantly cheaper, for example, than I am, right? And so usually it's just that quick fix. And so you're playing into what society, this sense of desperation that is created by magazines and is created by television and all these things. And you're playing at people's needs in order to suck them into this easy to do system.
Sure. And I completely agree with you. It's the same reason that I don't like Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman, and really, and from a financial perspective, really even Tony Robbins, because it's still very much playing on people's fear. I studied neuropsychology with the intention of how do I help people out of poverty. And when you do that research, right, you're studying psychology, so based on the brain. The brain is structured based on the chemical inputs or combinations that are expressed either inside the body or brought into the body from external sources. And so then that turns into, well, what's causing these chemicals to be created or influencing an environment? That's sociology. And that sociological research is done off of the grid lines of how much money, what's the financial education inside of a household. The people who have more money, they have better education, they have better resources, and they get the help they need. So I understand the philosophical argument. And I think that there's a time and a place to say, look, get debt free, debt free. The downside to focusing so much on becoming debt free and playing towards somebody's fear of debt and the whole thing is, from a psychological perspective, you're literally programming somebody to, so on Alice in Wonderland, right? You have the Cheshire Cat, and she says, hey, which pathway should I go down? And he's like, well, where do you want to go? And she says, well, I don't know. Well, then it doesn't matter then. Well, most people, they get to that and they, in their mind, they believe they want to go debt free. Well, what if the Cheshire Cat says, okay, let's just for argument's sake, right? One, there's a pond in the desert and there's desolation other than this one water source. Okay. But there's water. And then you go to this other place, there's water, but there's also food and animals and green and everything, right? As the Cheshire Cat, rather than asking, where do you want to go? Well, I don't know, then it doesn't matter, right? If I get to that desolate pool of water, and then I also find out from my friends that there was a wonderful golden green valley of everything, and the Cheshire Cat said it doesn't matter, then you're a freaking liar. At that point, that's where I get on the bandwagon and say, okay, I understand the dislike because somebody needs to take some integrity at that point. Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's responsibility because it's not really his responsibility, but have some integrity and some love and some compassion for humankind to say, maybe, I mean, do you really want this outcome? Do you want the desert outcome? If you do, this will work. But if you don't, 99% of people, they think they want the water, and they're selling their souls for the water instead of getting the water and everything else they want. So you can become debt free, but what you really want is financial independence. Right. And if I just help you become debt free, am I really helping you get what you really want? Even though you're telling me you just want debt free because that's the immediate pain, I think everybody knows what we really want is to not have to worry or think about or stress about money, not just become debt free. So anyways, it's an interesting thing. That's why I studied in college. So I think there's a good analogy there.
Yeah, no, I agree with you a lot. I see so many people that, especially as small business owners, you see them stop growing, and it's just because they put that concentration on debt management, and it's like they stop on their uphill swing almost. It's like, holy crap, you're in this huge growth phase and you're scared of putting money back into your business because you see this big debt number. But really, if you can increase your earnings exponentially and worry about the debt, for some of them, it's worry about the debt in 2 years. You know what I mean? Like, just make the payments on that bad boy and, continue doing what you're hopefully passionate about, and you can definitely carry on. Yeah.
It's an interesting topic. So I understand the dislike from it from a principle or perspective, not that it doesn't help people lose weight or get out of debt. It's not really the end goal that somebody actually wants. People don't want to just lose weight now. They want to, but then again, a lot of people I don't think know that they actually want to live a healthy lifestyle. All they know is they just want to lose weight, and they think that weight is indicative of health. And I'll be the first to tell you, and Danny probably, we've had this conversation before. We'll just put it that way. And I have it with every health professional because it is reality. It is almost 4:00 today. Okay. And this is not an uncommon thing for Sam. Okay. It's almost 4:00. I haven't eaten a single thing. I've had one piece of gum that apparently is 5 calories. Although there's definition of the word eating. Do you really eat a piece of gum or do you chew it? I don't know. Anyways, and I've had 32 ounces of water. And I don't feel lethargic. I don't feel like I have lack of energy. My stomach is not hungry. Like I just don't eat very much. And I don't know if that's healthy or not healthy. The fact is, I just don't know. But my assumption is I don't eat very much, but everybody's like, well, you'd have more energy, all this stuff. I'm like, I feel great. Like I really do feel great every day, the way I live my life. Does that mean if I went and got my blood tested, I would be the specimen of health? Probably not, but I'm thin. I like my size. Like I like everything. But does that mean I'm healthy? Well, and I know people who have been deathly sick. They eat crappy food. And if you looked at them like from their insides or their blood, they're super unhealthy, but they're thin. And so size isn't necessarily indicative of health. I think that's a fallacy.
Yeah, no, not even a little bit. Your situation's a little bit different, Sam. And don't get me wrong. Like obviously to really take a look at what this would look like, we'd have to take a hormone panel and we'd really have to do some blood work and kind of see where everything was at. But your struggle is not the one that is most common in this country. No,
that's definitely true. I hate eating is what happens.
That's
a waste of time.
The common struggle. The common struggle is that we have, the last time I looked at the number, it seems to range anywhere between 32 and 38% of this country is obese based on BMI, which is a complete nonsense measurement. But, you're
it
still,
is what it is.
Yeah, but you're still talking about, you're getting really close to a third of this country that is, at least 50 pounds overweight. Okay. And for so many of those people, because this is the other statistic that you read. Okay. So 80% of all people that have 50 pounds or more to lose actually lose that weight at some point in their life. Less than 20% of those people keep it off. Okay. So the people that we are working with are not the ones that are not eating until 3:00 in the afternoon or 4:00 in the afternoon, because they probably don't need me. They're probably thinking just like you that they're just fine. You know what I mean? And I would imagine, Sam, for you in particular, if you decide to take up, something along the lines of like extreme rock climbing or backcountry skiing, you might need to make some adjustments.
I'm sure if I was more active when I was younger, I would eat like 4 or 5 times a day. But now, honestly, 90% of my day, I would say 90% of my day is sitting at my desk. I don't move a lot. I exercise a little bit in the morning for 10, 15, 20 minutes, but like, I don't do a lot. And so it's like, I would be a freaking, I don't know how people eat as much as they eat. It's really shocking to me when I see somebody just like, even for me to eat at this point, a full hamburger, fries, and drink 16 ounces of liquid, whether it's water or soda. Like I'm stuffed. I can't move at the end of a meal that big, and it's like, just cause I don't know if it's my body doesn't need it, or I just haven't told my body that it needs it. So it just like is scared to, I don't know what it is, but it's,
from the sounds of it, my guess is that you're in a place where you listen to your hunger cues, right? The rest of society, not the rest, but a large portion of society doesn't do that. And it actually goes in both directions. So we've got another, and this one I don't have a percentage because I don't know, but we have this large portion of society that also struggles from an eating disorder. I do know that 1 in every 8 women will at some point have some sort of struggle eating disorder, and it's like 1 in every 33 males. And so you have people not listening to their hunger cues by eating too much, which is why we have such a major obesity problem in this country. But you've also got a large chunk of this population that is ignoring their hunger cues and not eating enough. For you, Sam, in particular, your organs seem to be functioning well. You seem to have a normal family life. I would imagine that you're able to go and, spend time with your wife, play with your children, all those things when it's time to do those things, right? But the reality of it is that we've got, probably at least 45% of this country that is not functioning at that level. And that's the struggle that we're having. And so that first time when you have a 3-year-old that wants to play and you physically are unable to get off the couch to do that, or you are just so lethargic that you just couldn't think of anything that you would want to do less. You know what I mean? At that point, it's probably time to make a change. And that's just kind of like steering to where the conversation initiated. That's when these people go to the most popular and the most talked about thing, whether it's Weight Watchers, keto, carnivore, all these other, keto is not necessarily a fad diet. If you have diabetes, then it can be helpful. But, my issue with keto, I'm going to talk about keto. Can we talk about keto?
Yeah, sure.
So my issue with keto is a little bit different than the issue that I have with Weight Watchers. Okay. This
is probably one of the most controversial diets I've ever heard of. It's just a rebranded Atkinson's diet. It's just like they just rebranded every 15 years so that more people are interested or whatever. They can keep reselling it.
I agree. Here's my biggest issue with keto. Honestly, it's simple. It's just the simple fact that I'm unwilling to be keto drunk, which is that phase when you first cut carbs out of your body and you feel pretty sick for about 7 days, 5 days, sometimes 3 days, sometimes 10 days. But there's a phase in there where you don't want to move and your body is transitioning from utilizing glycogen as fuel to where now you're supposed to be utilizing ketones, right? My issue with keto is it requires you to go through some misery, right? And then B, there's a very, very small portion of people that can maintain that ketosis state long-term, right? There are people that can do it for 3 to 6 months even, but nobody's going to do it forever. Not in this atmosphere, not in this country, right? They just don't do it. And so the issue with that is I don't believe in doing anything that you can't sustain long-term. That's just me. But here's why, okay? You have a group of people that takes such great pride in cutting carbs out of their diet, right? And you get a sense of accomplishment and you feel successful because you ate this number of carbs in a day, right? What happens when you don't? What happens when you start eating those carbs again? For most people, the answer is you get this overwhelming sense of guilt. Okay. You all of a sudden start eating carbs again. And there's a few things that happen when you have been in a state of ketosis long-term and you start eating carbs. Okay. First of all, your body is pretty excited about it, but you're going to put on a bunch of water weight. Okay. Because your body's all of a sudden going to start utilizing glycogen as fuel again. And glycogen gets sucked into your muscles and it expands and you gain water weight. That's really what it is. Okay. So after being in a ketosis state and you start eating food again or carbs again, all of a sudden you gain, for some people anywhere between, 5 and 8 pounds, depending on how long they've been in a ketosis state and how many grams of carbs they eat. Right. But you gain a bunch of weight. And so you had two of these things happen at the same time. All of a sudden, this thing that you were taking such great pride in is gone. And you have this sense of guilt for eating carbs in the first place. And then these same people are stepping on the scale. And all of a sudden, there's this sense of guilt because they had lost all this weight and bam, they just put 10 pounds back on. You know what I mean? So that's my issue with keto, where it's like, okay, you have to prep people for that. Like you have to help people understand, like, look, here's what this is doing. Okay. For most people on keto, they don't really understand. They just know that this person cut out carbs and they lost a bunch of weight. That's really all that they know. Mrs. Jones down the street lost 30 pounds on keto. That's about the extent of the science that they understand behind that diet, right?
Yeah, if that.
They
think that she lost 30 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. And
they caught her after she lost it before she gained it back again.
Exactly, which she does. You know what I mean? Because she started eating carbs again. But for most people, I would say over half the people that do the keto diet that lose weight, they accidentally are putting themselves in what's called a calorie deficit, right? So a calorie deficit, look, your body has a number of calories that it needs to use for fuel on a daily basis, right? A calorie deficit just means that you're eating less than that so that your body then has to turn to utilizing body fat for fuel instead of the food that you ate that day. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So they accidentally went into a calorie deficit simply by cutting out a third of all the foods available in the planet, right? Because you have proteins, fats, carbohydrates. They got rid of the carbs. They're gone. And so all of a sudden, 2/3 of the food options that were available to you are gone. And so they did that and they accidentally put themselves into a calorie deficit. Ironically, you can do that same thing with carbs in your diet. It's just that simple. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But again, for me, the biggest issue is, and then the other group of people, they cut the carbs out. They lost a crap ton of water weight, did not actually lose any fat. And you can drop carb weight within 3 to 5 days. And then all of a sudden they eat carbs again and can't figure out why they can't take that weight off long term. And so, yeah, it's a major thing, but that's my issue. Anything that starts creating a negative mindset towards food, that's my reason for being against it. I'm not against it because, somebody made a bunch of money off of the idea. I'm against it for the simple fact that this country as a whole has now demonized carbs. And for some reason, they've decided that carbs make you gain weight. And that's just not the case. We can find a healthy way for anybody and everybody, unless you are a diabetic, which is a little bit different. But, if you're not diabetic, if you don't have severe insulin resistance, then you can eat carbs and you can lose weight while eating carbs.
Yeah, I think that just on that note, to go back into your history a little bit, but again, it goes back to the tool and being misused or not used. Sometimes pharmaceutical drugs are actually the right tool, and sometimes they're helpful for the right thing. But when they're starting to be misused is that's when the big problem is. Or when we say, well, I think Viagra is a fairly good example. Viagra was created for something completely different than what we use it for now.
Oh yeah. Wait, what was Viagra created for?
I think it was like heart something. I don't remember.
Really?
I don't know. You'd have to do research. I'm not doing it right now. But basically, this happens all the time where stuff is created for one thing, and we find out that the byproduct is really, really fantastic. And so then, or has multiple uses. And so then we start using the one thing to treat all the multiple uses without recognizing that the average healthy body actually is more harmed than not, right? Insulin, insulin's great or I don't know if I would say it's great, but it's helpful for somebody who's diabetic. But if somebody who doesn't need insulin starts shooting up insulin just because, well, it obviously helps that person, it helps me too. It's an energy shot or whatever. It's just like, no, that is not how.
That's not going to do you a lot of good.
That's not how. Yeah, that's not how medicine. That's not how food. That's not how money. That's not how anything works in life. And so just because one thing is good for one thing doesn't mean it's good for everything. And it is important to have a professional who understands when something is good and has no, not just understands it, but has no ulterior motive to help you believe that one thing is better than for what it's not, right?
I agree. It's also important to ask questions. So I mean, obviously, right, this whole podcast, I've been kind of talking about the responsibility of other large corporations and how they need to educate their clients, right? But as a consumer, you have to be willing to ask those questions. And even your doctor, I know that as a country, we revere our doctors, and that's not a bad thing. They help us so much, right? But think in your head for half a second how many clients your doctor is seeing on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis, right? Like so many times I've seen people go into their doctor's office and they happen to be the 7th person that has depression that they're prescribing a depression pill to. And then all of a sudden, 15 years later, you're on that same depression pill and not really sure why. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like it's okay to ask some questions and make sure that you're getting the best quality of care.
Yeah, I completely agree. After our second child, my wife went in one day because she just had it. She was all the way ready she just had it. And so she went into the doctor and they were like, oh yeah, here's Zoloft. And I'm like, no, we're going to throw those away. Or just, I don't know. I honestly don't know what we did with them. Hopefully some random didn't find them in the trash can.
Right.
But I'm like, no, we're going to invest some time and energy into finding out what are your chemical levels? You don't just go prescribe some wildly man-made chemical substance that they didn't do any research other than, oh, you're feeling sad today? Yeah, here's some Zoloft. What? No, that's not.
Yeah,
Not
do you know our experience with Zoloft, Sam?
I just have heard other people's experience with it. My mom's been on it a little bit, and Paxil or something. I don't know what it. Prozac.
So I'll tell you what, Darcy was on Zoloft for 8 years, and I didn't really think anything of it, but she started kind of going through this fitness journey. And my issue with Zoloft is, again, like when you are in your 20s or 30s, a lot of times these doctors will prescribe an SSRI or any other type of antidepressant and then just plug it in as cured. They're fixed. They don't need it anymore. They don't need my help anymore, right? Unless you need it, right? There are people that need to be on antidepressants for a lifetime.
Sure.
Darcy was not one of those people, because again, all of a sudden I come into her life and I'm that person that wants to be way more holistic in that approach than be on a prescription forever. Come to find out that she had spent all this time on Zoloft when really the problem was she had a low producing thyroid, she had low testosterone levels and low progesterone levels. All of a sudden we took the effort to fix her nutrition and got some medications in line to get her hormone levels back to where they were supposed to be. And then her doctors ended up helping her taper off that antidepressant. But with that being said, she had physical withdrawals from that antidepressant. Like, it was not an easy process to get off that thing.
Yeah. And I'm not an expert. All I have is hearsay, but it's nothing I've heard from that specific antidepressant has been good. So, no. and in my line of work, it's like a major red flag. As soon as that comes up, it's just like, I don't know. You could be on pretty much any other antidepressant, but the minute that one comes up, people are like, nah, no, thanks. So it's just fascinating that it's so, I don't know all the research. I think growing up, I was talking to my wife about this the other day, due to my childhood and how we were trained or taught about the medical system. We've been naturopath our whole life. And so to a fault, I would say, and I'll share an experience, two experiences. Well, I'll share one for sake of time, but I was out doing summer sales out in Philadelphia, and now I'm going to share both because they're both hilarious, I think. I can't. So I'm out there, and I had, so when I was a baby, I got chickenpox. I didn't get any vaccines because we didn't get vaccines. I didn't get vaccines till I was like 18 years old. 0 vaccines. So finally I get my vaccines, but I had already had chickenpox. And so you don't really get shingles unless you've had chickenpox. Well, I didn't know what shingles were. I heard my grandpa had them, but I was like, oh, that sounds uncomfortable. Well, I'm out doing summer sales then, and I just start getting this rash coming up my tailbone and reaching around my body. And I just think, oh, I'll just like wash it out. I'll put some lotion on it. It'll be okay. It'll go away, because I don't want to go to the doctor. So I spent 2 weeks walking around in 100+ degree humid weather with a tight belt around my waist, itching on this thing. Finally, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I call my mom, FaceTime her. I'm like, hey, check out my butt. No, not really. But like, what the heck is this? And she's like, oh, it looks like shingles. Just go to the doctor. So I went down to the doctor down the street. They gave me an antibiotic. Literally 24 hours later, it was gone. And I was like, at that point in time, I was like, okay, I really waited too long to trust the medical system. That could have avoided so much pain and discomfort.
That is
I was
awful.
Not so anti. So I think there's a flip side to, like, I still am that way. I still will basically, I don't even know the last time I went to the doctor. That was probably it. But even that being said, I recognize that one day that might kill me, so the second experience was after my mission. Since I was probably 16, I had hernias. But I was like, I don't want to go to the doctor. I don't want to go to the doctor. So I just never went and got it taken care of. Went on my mission. It was still okay. Well, by the time I get off my mission, I'm starting to do summer sales again, working. I still walked around with a hernia until pretty much it was the intestine was dropping down into the scrotum probably 2 or 3 times a day. And I just like push it back up and I was like, it's fine, And then finally I was like, there's a problem with this at some point, I might die. This is
uncomfortable.
So
like,
finally
why is Sam touching his junk all the time?
Yeah. Finally I went and got it fixed. But it's just funny, like being so extreme in my way is not healthy either. Right. So we have the reason I'm sharing those stories is to make an example of myself. I don't know where the right line is. So I'm not here to profess anything about right lines, but that I have my own struggles on the flip side where there are right surgeries, there are right things to help when they're the right thing to do, and making sure you're doing that under the advisement of people who have more knowledge than just pharmaceutical knowledge or just homeopathic knowledge. I think there's a balance between that. It's good to be talking with both groups of people. No, I agree with you so much. I mean, it's funny because I have a similar experience with strep. I stuck with my strep for like 6 days. It was the most miserable experience. It's just a cold. It'll go away. Vitamin C.
And it's so bad because then when you can look in the mirror and you can see your own strep happening in your throat, like it was pretty awful. Not gonna lie. So yeah, I have that same experience. I hate going to the doctor. I don't. And I'm also, I've got that whole like, I don't want to help big pharma mindset. Like, screw those guys. They've got plenty of money. Like, I just, whatever.
At what cost, man? At what cost?
I know. That's just my thing. That's part of why I eat healthy, bro. I don't want to depend on a doctor for my health at all.
I know. Well, and that's the thing. I don't go to the doctor. I rarely get sick. The last time I was sick, it probably was COVID. Who knows? But it was in January, and for whatever reason, for like 2 days, I couldn't move off the couch. I had to have my wife call and cancel appointments for my work, and I was like, "This just isn't working." And then it was just
for you.
I know. For me, I was like, "I'll work through anything," but that laid me out. And then after that, I was fine. So anyways, but I rarely get sick. I don't even past that last time. I don't remember the last time I was sick past that. So
I think you just have a good connection with your body, Sam. Like, it's funny to see that because you're such an intellectual person. You don't really expect somebody that's that intellectual to have a good feel for what's going on with their body. Like my dad he's a tax accountant, and he's just one of the more intellectual people I know, and he has no idea what's going on with his body. And so just the fact that you pay enough attention and listen to your body enough to, give it what it needs, that's not a bad place to be.
Yeah, well, I do my best. So a question, because we are past an hour, but that's fine. I love talking to you. But what if somebody else wanted to get more information, actually wanted to get help or a consultation or just interact with you? Where's the best place to reach out to you? Where are you most active?
I'm all over Instagram, DND Fitness and Nutrition on Instagram. Getting Stronger Together is the Facebook page. The website's it's the letter D, the letter N, and the letter D for all of those. The podcast is D and then the and symbol D, Fitness and Nutrition. Here's the thing, guys. If you send me a DM, you'd be amazed how many people I just help without charging a dime. And don't get me wrong, I'm able to pay my bills, doing things that I love to do. So I do get paid as well. But if it's as simple as taking a half an hour or an hour to just try and help somebody, I'm so happy to do that. And if you want to pay me, cool. But there's really never any pressure for that. I'm honestly, legitimately of the opinion of I just want to help people.
Yeah, likewise. I think that's the best way to be. And that's why I try and align myself and at least have friends that are similar minded, that's the objective, is to help people. And then the right people will pay you for your services. And the people that don't, the fact is they didn't listen to what you said in the first place. And so they're not coming back around because like, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about because I didn't do what he asked. Okay. Well, yeah. You're not a good fit for me anyways.
And it's okay. But if I can help, honestly, just to have my name intertwined with the idea of, hey, that's a pretty good guy and he wants to help people, like that matters to me,
Yep. Likewise. So here's the final question. It's my favorite question. So we have to pretend that you actually died though. So just be okay with that. COVID happened. You died. No, I'm just kidding. So you died 6 generations from now. This is your great grandchildren sitting around the table discussing the impact you had, the people you helped, the legacy that you left. What do you want them to be saying about your legacy 6 generations from now?
For me, my legacy is definitely going to be, he was a drug addict. He found sobriety. And then he went back into that pit to help other people out. That is how I want to be remembered. And that is who I want to be.
Cool. I love it. And if you get to know him, you'll find out that's who he is, which is more important, that he's actually living what he wants to be remembered as, not just passively hoping that somebody remembers him a certain way without putting any effort into it.
Right.
Hey, that's the case with many people, unfortunately. So
like, hey, write this down. This is how I want you to remember me.
Yeah. When I'm 80 years old on my deathbed. No, well, thank you so much. And the truth is, guys, you're worth being remembered. That's why we do this podcast. I'm so grateful for your time, Danny, for taking time out of your day. I know we had to move some things around to make it happen, but thanks for staying with us and sharing your love and your care for the world.
Hey, thanks, Sam. Thanks for having me, man.
Yep, no problem. We'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy Show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me. And if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.